Hello everyone. The region that we are going to focus today is the Malacca Strait. Malacca Strait is very important because majority of the global trade happens through this particular region. So from the exam point of view, it is always important for us to cover the Malacca Strait and to focus on the countries that are surrounding the Malacca Strait and to understand its importance better. So let's come to the location part. Now, we know that strait is a narrow body of water that connects two large water bodies, right? So the Strait of Malacca here, it connects Andaman Sea to the South China Sea. Now, Andaman Sea is part of the Indian Ocean and South China Sea is part of the Pacific Ocean, right? So it connects Andaman Sea and South China Sea. So that is the first most important point. Now, where is it located? It is located between Sumatra, which is part of Indonesia on the west, and peninsular Malaysia with southern Thailand on the east, right? So you have the southern part of Thailand here and the peninsular part of Malaysia, okay? So that is there towards the east and the Sumatra Islands of Indonesia on the western part, right? So this is the second most important point. It serves as the main link between Indian and Pacific Ocean. As I said, Andaman Sea is part of Indian Ocean and it connects the Indian and Pacific Ocean, where South China Sea is part of the Pacific Ocean. Now, as I said before, about 60% of India's seaborne trade and nearly all of its LNG import transit through it, right? So majority of our LNG imports and 60% of our trade happens through Malacca Strait, right? Earlier, if you could see, we have covered the Strait of Hormuz, right? Now, Strait of Hormuz is very important because most of our energy imports happens there, right? Our crude oil imports, right? Because the Persian Gulf countries are major crude oil exporters, right? Whereas Strait of Malacca becomes important from the commercial trade point of view, right? Most of the trade happens here. And when you take a country like China, China imports majority of the crude oil through the Strait of Malacca only. So that is where, okay, Malacca Strait becomes inevitable. It also serves as critical choke point for China's shipping routes. As I said now, okay, it is very important for China. What role does Strait of Malacca play in global trade? We have covered a few points. Let's try to understand some more. The Strait of Malacca functions as one of world's most important commercial shipping routes. Just I said that it is very important for commercial shipping, right? Whereas Strait of Hormuz is primarily associated with energy exports. It is the shortest maritime path linking West Asian and African resource exporters with East Asian industrial economies. Now, East Asia, if you see countries like ASEAN, these are major industrial economies, right? And for this industry to function, they need resources, right? They need crude oil, they need everything, all the resources. Now, the resource rich countries from the Middle East, from Africa, all these countries that export their resources, which are imported by the industrial economies, right? So Malacca Strait again becomes very important for this trade to happen, right? And the reverse trade also happens. Like for example, the industrial countries, like suppose the ASEAN countries, they are major exporters. Now, whatever they are exporting, again the export goes back to countries in Africa or the European part through the Malacca Strait, right? So it becomes very important for the two-way trade, right? So approximately 1/4 of all goods traded internationally travel through the Strait of Malacca. Almost 1/4, right? 25% of the overall trade happens through this particular region. So that shows its importance. The corridor also handles roughly 1/4 of oil transported by sea worldwide, right? Again, 1/4 of oil transport also is handled here, right? You could see the number, more than 23 million barrels per day, okay, oil shipments happen on an average, right? So it is the busiest oil transit corridor globally by volume, right? So these are some of the important points of the Malacca Strait. Now, how is it important for India? We have seen its importance from the global perspective. Now, how is it important for our country? More than 30% of India's total trade by value happens through the Malacca Strait, right? More than 30% of total trade by in value terms, right? So it is essential for Indian exporters to Southeast Asian economies, Japan, South Korea, and west coast of the United States, right? So the goods that are exported to the western part of United States, okay, it goes through the Malacca Strait. So India is also focusing on strengthening its maritime presence near the Strait of Malacca, right? Because, like for example, if we don't have maritime presence in this particular region, right? So it is very difficult for us to protect our trade, okay, our trade interests. Like what are the goods that are coming to India? What are the goods that are going from India? Okay, we have to ensure that it is happening smoothly. Okay, there are no, like for example, piracy is there. Okay, so we have to counter that. So that is why strengthening the maritime presence is very important so that this region can be patrolled. And India also wants to be a net security provider in this region, right? We want to ensure that everything happens smoothly, and we are one of the most powerful naval forces in this particular region, right? So that is why we are increasing the maritime presence in this particular area. So in Feb last month, okay, National Green Tribunal approved 9.7 billion Great Nicobar project. This is again a very important project in news. Okay, we'll cover it. So the main part of this is, as part of this project, India is constructing an international container transshipment terminal. Okay, designed to handle large volumes of cargo. Now, transshipment is actually what happens is like where goods will be unloaded and reloaded again in another ship, right? So this is called a transshipment terminal, right? We'll discuss that in detail later, but try to understand that we are trying to have our own transshipment terminal, right? Earlier we were dependent on countries like Singapore, Dubai, or even Colombo port. Okay, these are major transshipment ports in this region. But now when we are trying to develop Great Nicobar as a major transshipment terminal. We'll try to understand one more question, okay, which was already asked in UPSC. UPSC has actually touched this region, but it was way back in 2010, right? We'll try to understand the question. Which of the following can come across if we travel through the Strait of Malacca, right? They have given you the regions, we need to find out which region, right? If you could see this map here, the Strait of Malacca is somewhere here, right? So this is the Strait of Malacca. So you find Singapore here. So Singapore is actually the answer, right? So when you go through the Strait of Malacca, you find Singapore. So it's a very direct question, right? Now we'll try to understand the other regions also. We have Bali here, okay? So Bali is part of Indonesia. So it is not anywhere near Strait of Malacca, right? We have Brunei. Brunei is again, it's not near Strait of Malacca, right? So Brunei is here. Java. Java is again, it's part of Indonesia, right? So you have Java. So these things are nowhere near Strait of Malacca, only Singapore is there. So now see, these kind of questions can be answered only if you have a photographic memory of the map, right? At least the news, at least the regions that are in news. Okay, we have to focus that a lot. So that is why, okay, we are starting this series on maps. So that if you keep watching this again and again, you will try to remember the places, okay, where they are.